Welcome to The Torch, a podcast by the Riverside County Office of Education.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dominique Samario, the Chief Strategic Partnerships and Communications Officer at the Riverside County Office of Education. Here on The Torch, our goal is to highlight the issues our families and educators are talking about and explore them with community leaders. That's why I am excited about today's guests. There are people and programs who approach education through a unique lens and support student and educator learning at an entirely new level. Hardy Brown, Managing Principal and Chief Relationship Officer of Footsteps to Freedom, does just that. Hardy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are so glad to have you here at the Riverside County Office of Education. And I want to just start by saying I have had the privilege of getting to work with you as part of a Footsteps to Freedom's tour. And this is really a reminder of that experience for me. And so thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Getting a chance to go out to the Equity Conference that you all host every single year is really exciting because I get a chance to run into all the Footsteps people from different districts throughout Riverside County. And, although I'm in San Bernardino County, we do a lot of work here in Riverside County. And I always enjoy coming back home.
Oh, I love that. And, so much of today, we're going to be talking about history. Mm-hmm. And I think that our audience will be able to have, just more of a respect and understanding for the history you're going to share if they know a little bit about your history. Would you share your background with us?
The best way to explain what I do for a living and who I am is I'm almost like an Indiana Jones meets Dora the Explorer.
Oh, man, that's next level. I got the wrong title, I guess,
No, I get a chance to run into artifacts and they tell me stories, and it's all about storytelling. But it starts with my story and how we get to where we are. My family, we've owned the Black Voice newspaper for the last 55 years here in downtown Riverside. We've been publishers of our newspaper. So I love looking at the idea of the printing press and how we get to telling stories. But I was not that student coming out of school. And so I graduated from San Bernardino High School. And one of the things I wanted to do is, as we have this conversation today, I wanted to explain to you the work that we do, but then also bring out primary source artifacts to show you. I never thought I would be the person who would end up in history. So I brought for you,
let's see, my
high school yearbook.
On the cutting edge. You've always been, right?
It was a little over 700 years ago.
Perfect.
And
sounds about right now.
This is me in high school. I was never that great student. I never got in trouble, but I was never that great student. And
this is amazing.
I remember applying to one college and one college only, and that was Wilberforce University. And Wilberforce University is the nation's first historically Black college owned and operated by African Americans in the United States. It started in 1856. And I remember going to the campus. And when I went to the campus, that's when everything changed for me. Wow. I started to see students that were from Detroit and Chicago and Cincinnati and Indianapolis, Columbus, and just all over the country. They were sharp. They had fun, like I did, but they were also sharp. And at that point, I started to realize I can do more. And I remember a professor walking up to me and saying, "Young man, if you put some meat with those potatoes, you can do something." I was like, what is he talking about? And at that point, when I started meeting all those friends, I started to realize exactly what I had missed out even on my high school experience, understanding my why. And it took a number of years later for me to start going on our Underground Railroad tour, the Footsteps of Freedom, to see exactly the why and how I got to where I am today. And so that story is now kind of interweaved into the work that we do at Footsteps of Freedom. We take educators on tours of the Underground Railroad, and we literally go from Kentucky, Ohio, Michigan. We drive across Canada, and we end in upstate New York. And we try to tell the stories that were more alike than different, and that using historical empathy, learning to walk in each other's stories and each other's shoes, that you can now see how great these stories can be. In doing that, we looked at the Library of Congress, and that model is observe, reflect, and question. Just that simple.
Yeah.
Observe, reflect, and question. And so when I look at these pieces here, I now start to understand, yes, I too can be a part of history. I was elected as the first African American to serve on the San Bernardino County Board of Education. I represented them for about two terms, and I've represented 33 school districts and 400,000 students. So I got a chance to meet the entire diverse community of San Bernardino County. I worked statewide. I worked here in Riverside County and doing work here. And every voice that I heard helped me tell all these stories that we're going to work through today.
It's just amazing. You're, even briefly reflecting on what you shared, the power of education.
Yes.
And its transformative nature when you went to Wilberforce, but also speaks to the power of that one person in someone's life.
Yes.
And the gentleman who said, add some meat to those potatoes, and you're like, wait, I can do this.
Yes.
That can be me. It is me as well. Right. And I just love that. And also the fact that you have this yearbook, I would just like to note, that's you, Hardy, on page 1.
That is me.
I mean, somebody knew some big things were coming from this gentleman.
I tell you, when I grew up watching movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I realized that's exactly what we're talking about. I am that person. But once I became a student and a scholar of the research, of the stories, of primary sources, to me, that's kind of where it all started. And I've really built in, and now I've read everything every single day. I'm reading new pieces and I'm tying them together and trying to tell a bigger story. And that is that, you look throughout the entire Riverside County and San Bernardino County, there's millions of people here. And these people come from all over the place. So how did we get here?
That's incredible. And I'm so excited. Truly, I mean this, honored to be able to go through these sources and these stories with you today. But give me a little bit more background. So, you got to this place, you found your passion and your why, which then ignited, I am a scholar and I can do this and I'm inspired by those around me. That's incredible. But how did you then fall in love with this concept of primary sources?
I didn't expect to do it.
And you know what?
Yeah.
You also share with us, what do you mean by primary sources? What is it that we're looking at?
So primary sources are those original documents. Those are first-person original documents. And these are the things that we're even taught at grade school, starting on up. That is the basis of how we start to learn stories. And so when I look at primary sources, let's take, for example, and you don't need gloves for these just yet. I'll show you when you do.
Okay, you just let me know.
But we're talking about our high school years. So imagine this.
Oh, look
the
at
peachy
that.
folder.
Classic right there.
These are the classic pieces that were a part of my childhood growing up. And we think that it's something that is totally out there and totally different. But this is something that every person, when they touch an artifact, it can take them back to that place. It can take them back to that exact place, that exact time when they were in 8th grade and they were going to school and they had this folder and they were coloring everything in, when they were writing notes and putting each one of these in. And a lot of times we think that history is so far removed, but it's not. I mean, if you look right now here in Riverside County, Dr. Judy White, who was right before Dr. Gomez, as the first African-American to serve as superintendent here in Riverside County. Well, look at this piece right here.
Also, while you're grabbing that, can I just note 55 cents?
55 cents.
I like the price tag on there.
Right. So this is an original piece. Dr. Judy White, she was a superintendent of a Christian school. And that is back, what's the date on that one?
August 24th, 1987. Nearly 40 years ago. Look at that.
This is a part of her history.
Sincerely, Judy D. White, superintendent. That is amazing.
Those stories show that someone was here. And that's what our newspaper has been doing for so many years. They've been documenting all of this information of the Inland Empire. They've documented so many pieces. And so as I was going through our archives with the Black Voice, I started to look at each one of these pieces and said, how can I make this where it's really fun and creative, but also it's rich, it's detailed, it's scholarly. And we started collecting these pieces, putting them into an archive, and then started telling stories, bringing them out to schools. And we bring them to schools, universities, so K through 12. It's also at universities, community colleges, corporations, county offices of education, museums. And we set up exhibits and we tell the story. So now I'm going to have you put the gloves on.
Okay, I'm so ready for
And I'll take you back to Footsteps to Freedom.
Oh my gosh.
We're crossing from Maysville, Kentucky, and we're going into Ohio. Do you remember what it felt like to walk up John Rankin Hill? For those who don't know, I'll give a little background first. Rankin Hill is in Brown County, Ohio. It's in Ripley, Ohio. It's a little small town. And in that town, there's a white male Presbyterian minister with his family who works with a black man by the name of John Parker. And together in that town, they help over 2,000 people get to freedom. And as they get to freedom, they're coming across the Ohio River from Kentucky into this town of Ripley. And they're making it with John Parker all the way up to Reverend John Rankin's house. What makes the story so powerful is this is in the early 1800s. Harry Beecher Stowe goes down to Maysville, Kentucky once, and she sees her very first slave auction block. And when she sees a slave auction block, she gets inspired to write the story, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And that right there is kind of where we start. Good people who work together, who look like you and me and everyone else listening and watching this, figured out a way to change the world together. What was it like for you walking up Rankin Hill?
Oh, man. It's bringing me back. Those moments were so powerful because you thought, wow, this is physically difficult. It's steep. It's hot. It's, all the things you're thinking about yourself and your experience. And I just kept going back and thinking, but wait a second, I have shoes on my feet. I'm not carrying any small belongings that I could run away with. I don't have a child on my back. I'm not doing it at night. I have, while, not elaborate, I have stairs to walk up, right? Trees have been cleared for me. And none of that circumstance would be the same for them. And I didn't have any fear. I didn't have anyone chasing me. I didn't just cross a river. And to just be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes for that moment and also recognize how much more they were going through. It was so powerful and then so inspiring when you reached the top and you thought the individuals in the house at the top were also standing up for something, So it really brings me back. So thank you for asking that question.
And that's what these do every single time. The reason why we put the gloves on is because people really wore these. These are shackles from enslavement. Oh, they were really on people. And I think a lot of times we think about from our books, we see the pictures, but it's not the same as holding them in your hand. Those are mother-child slave shackles from the Gore collection. They were on a child where they sold the child away from the mother for $500 in the 1840s, forever. Never to be seen again. Jerry Gore, who was our lead historian, who started me off on many of these pieces in the collection, he was a major collector in that particular area, and he never had children and was never married. And so he wanted me and my sister to be the stewards of these pieces. And so I don't hold them lightly. I hold them with the reverence to understand when we talk about education and I talk about going to Wilberforce, I now know what that means. Yes. Because someone like Frederick Douglass is a little boy. His master's wife is teaching him how to read and write. And the master walks in and slaps the book out of her hand and says, if you teach a slave to read and write, you will unfit them to be a slave. We work with the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, and you've met his family members, his descendants. Yes. And when you think about that, one of the stories that he would tell would be that Frederick Douglass, as soon as that happened, Frederick Douglass knew. He knew there must be something in the power of these words, the power of this reading. And so he would start to trade food for letters and letters for words until he writes this iconic work and becomes one of the great abolitionist stories and voices. And it's just the power of education and trying to do better. And enslaved people coming out of enslavement, the one thing they wanted to do more than anything else was just learn how to read before they passed away. And so now when I take the artifacts and I take these stories, now it means that much more to me when I look at students from Hampton University, where Booker T. Washington went to school, and then starts Tuskegee University. And you start to see people who are sitting in classrooms right after slavery. Fisk University, that produces W.E.B. Du Bois, who becomes the first African American to graduate from Harvard University with his PhD.
Wow.
After that, his job, he becomes, and I'll take that back.
Thank you.
He becomes a professor at Wilberforce University, where he becomes best friends with Colonel Charles Young. And as he becomes best friends with Colonel Charles Young, that's after Charles Young became the third African American to graduate from West Point.
Wow.
He comes from that same town that Harriet Beecher Stowe saw the slave auction block. The same thing that we talked about when we walked across the river. All these people come from the same exact area, and the one thing they wanted more than anything was an education. And so I brought a couple of pieces from Wilberforce and from our collection for you to see. I think the thing that really blew my mind about going to Wilberforce and attending Wilberforce was kind of learning their story. And this individual piece right here, this is in the Smithsonian right now. Yeah. So
really?
That is one of the flags that is in the Smithsonian. I wanted to understand, and this is me now becoming a collector, why is it that the nation's first historically black college, owned and operated by African Americans, was named after a white British abolitionist from Parliament in the 1700s? It blew my mind. I did not understand it at all. And with the help of technology today, I've now been able to find new stories that I never found before.
Really?
And that's what I really love, is finding these new stories. So one of the people that I found was a guy named Thomas Clarkson. So I'm going to take you back to the year 1785. Thomas Clarkson is a student. Thomas Clarkson is a student at the University of Cambridge. And as a student at the University of Cambridge, his professor, he's in a contest, and they ask a simple question. Should it be legal for one human being to own another human being against their will? I'll say it again. Should it be legal for one, let's take out class, ethnicity, gender,
Absolutely.
race. Should it be legal for one human being to own another human being against their will? Thomas Clarkson starts to do the research. He starts to go pick up all these artifacts.
Wow.
And he starts to talk to people down at the shipping yards. He starts to go and to the stacks of the library, and he's reading books. He's learning about the Quakers and all these different groups. And he says, wow, no. And so he wins first prize. When he wins first prize, he turns around and works with Granville Sharp and a number of other people in that time period, and they develop the British Anti-Slavery Society. They go to William Wilberforce and they talk to William Wilberforce. He's in Parliament, and William Wilberforce takes that charge. And for 20 years, he's fighting to abolish the transatlantic slave trade. He's putting it in bill after bill each year in the 1780s and 1790s, all the way until 1807, where they finally abolished the transatlantic slave trade.
Wow.
And what that means for those who are just watching and listening, that is the time period where someone like John Newton in 1752, and I'm not talking about the Apple guy.
Exactly.
John Newton was a slave ship captain. And as a slave ship captain, he would go from Bristol and Liverpool, England. We have the records in our collection. And he would go down to the Gold Coast of Africa, where he would purchase and trade for 250 enslaved Africans. He would go sell them over in the islands, so Barbados, St. John, St. Kitts. And then he would bring rum, sugar, spices, silver, those types of things back to the kingdom, back to the UK. As he did that, he would write letters to his wife, and we have some of the letters in our collection. He would write letters saying, I can't believe I'm part of this trade. And he was doing all kinds of things. And he finally leaves the trade and becomes a minister. And when he becomes a minister and leaves the trade, he writes something that we know to this day. He writes the song Amazing Grace.
Oh.
We sing that every day when it comes down to our civil rights movements, when it comes down to church and our togetherness. That is a song of healing. That is a song of hope. That was written by a slave ship captain who realized his wrong, and we don't know him for his wrongs. The way I tell students, we know him for the song Amazing Grace. So I don't care what you did yesterday. last month, last year, tomorrow can always be a new day. And he joined up with many of these abolitionists, and you can now start to see the voice of people coming together. Oladiah Equiano, Granville Sharp, Thomas Clarkson, William Wilberforce. All these people come together at the same time here in the United States. People like Frederick Douglass, people like John Rankin, John Parker, Sojourner Truth. People are now speaking, and they're speaking up for this idea of freedom and growth. I'm inspired by it because it's using education. It's using the powers of togetherness. And once you read through the stories, you realize that everything that they're trying to do today, which is, let's get us all fighting, you against me against you, it's that group versus this group. If we would just sit back and go back to the days of high school, we realize we all drank out the water hose. We all had our peachy folders. We all hung out together. We did all these different things. And we are more alike than different. Just like when I read these stories of these people in the 1700s and the 1800s.
It's so powerful. And the example about Amazing Grace, right? One of my all-time favorite songs. I feel like that is just this small picture of what history can do for our students, for all of us, really. We're all students, right? We are lifelong learners, because you can tell someone, it doesn't matter what you did yesterday. You have a chance to change it today and tomorrow, right? And that's beautiful and that's powerful. And somebody out there is going to hear that and they're going to go, you're right. It matters what I do tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But when you tell the story of someone who was a captain of a ship for the slave trade and then completely turns their life around, and they wrote a song that we're all singing today. Mm-hmm. Then as the listener, you go, man, that's real. Mm. And that's happened before. That could happen for me, right? Is that kind of one of the reasons that this history is so impactful, because we can pull from those lessons in such a tangible way, such a, real way.
Mm-hmm. That's what I get a chance to do every day. And what I like most about this entire process, and I'll kind of put this back out again. What I love most about this process is when I find things I did not expect. So for example, this book right here, and the covers come off, they're a little beat up, but this book right here is the very first law book for the state of California.
Oh my goodness.
This is 1853. Jeez. That's an original book. And it has all of our early laws. So in 1850, we have the Compromise of 1850, which brings California into statehood. We also have, at that time, the Fugitive Slave Law, which is the law that says that no matter where an enslaved person runs to get to freedom, that at that point, anybody has to grab them and bring them back.
Right.
That's what causes them to go into Mexico. That's what causes them to go into Canada. That's what causes them to leave the country. Well, when I picked this book up, one of the things I did not know were the things that were going to be in the book outside of that. So imagine this. It's a state of California book. I'm thinking California law. Well, it has an 1853 or 1850 copy of the U.S. Constitution in there. But it also has in there something pretty interesting, and it is the Treaty of Hidalgo. So after the Mexican-American War,
right,
the Treaty of Hidalgo happens. And here's the Declaration of Independence with the signers. But right here is the treaty with Mexico. We learn these in our schools. And that's an original copy of the Treaty of Hidalgo.
Wow. Treaty of Peace, Friendship, Limits, and Settlement. That's
so I don't have to debate. I just open the primary source. I use the Library of Congress model, which is observe, reflect, and question. And I go through and I read. And I try to understand these stories and understand who wrote with this and who put this together and how did this work and what printing press did they use. And I go through and, for students who are watching this, when you get into really old books, one of the first things that you'll do is you'll start to actually smell the old books. They have a distinct smell about them. But it's something that is intoxicating where you're just like, wow, this was really history. This was something that somebody really used. At the opposite time, this is the state of Virginia. And in the state of Virginia, these are the laws that said that Frederick Douglass could not read and write. These are the laws that said that if you left the state, they'd have to bring them back in. These are the laws of slavery. These are the laws of all those different things. But I take these because I think that it's important for people to read the primary sources, have discussions with them, and then find stories out of them that they can pull out. So, every day for me, it's something new. I continue to find new stories with it. And that's what kind of ties and binds it all together.
That is so powerful. And just the way that you translate this for the lifelong learners, the adult educators, so they can bring these experiences back to their students. And it's the story of footsteps to freedom along the Underground Railroad, but it's the example that gives for the way all of history can be applied and can inspire our students, right? And then going into the classrooms, having the exhibits out for the public at museums and other locations, it's so powerful. And but something that I think, you could write these things, you could kind of share these stories in a million ways, but I think it's your passion that really elevates the impact because, I love history. I love learning. I don't know that I would have said, oh man, look at this book. And, I'll get updates from you. Look what I just found. I just found this map. And I'm like, I'm so excited about this map. Like, this is amazing, but it's because you're so excited. And I've seen the way that can transform people. Yeah. And that's so beautiful.
And the stories are personal. So we're now here in California. We're looking at the California law book. So imagine this, and I'll tell you a story that kind of brings us home to California. There's a woman by the name of Lizzie Rowan. She's a little girl. She is given as a gift into slavery in the Carolinas where my family was enslaved. She comes across the Oregon Trail, so 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. She comes across the Oregon Trail through Utah and then down into San Bernardino.
Wow.
She's with Biddy Mason. Biddy Mason goes off into Los Angeles, becomes the story that we always tell because she becomes one of the founders of Los Angeles and multimillionaire. But this court case that the judge worked on made sure that they were going to honor the law that says that California was a free state. And as they did that, Lizzie Rowan was freed. She didn't go to Los Angeles. She stayed right here. She stayed right here in the Inland Empire in San Bernardino, and she married a man by the name of Charles. Charles and Lizzie have a daughter by the name of Alice. Alice Rowan becomes one of the first African Americans to graduate from Pauley High School.
Oh my God.
After graduating from Pauley High School, she attends the Normal School of Southern California. The Normal Schools were started by Horace Mann back in the 1830s. That became teachers' colleges. That would be Chico State, San Diego State, the state schools.
Look at that.
But here in Los Angeles, in this area, she attends the Normal School of Southern California. They later changed their name, making her the first African American in 1888 to graduate from this school. They changed her name to UCLA.
Look at that.
She becomes a teacher right here in Riverside.
Oh,
she teaches for her entire career here. She passes away and she's buried right here in Riverside, one generation removed from slavery. And her mother is buried right there in San Bernardino, right down the street from my office. These are the stories that our students need to know. Because we can take these stories, tie it directly to something that they think was so far away and it didn't happen here in California. And then you can find a story that brings you right here. You can see Booker T. Washington right here in Riverside. You can see John W. North, an abolitionist right here in Riverside. You can see these abolitionists who made their way out here to tell some of those stories.
That is powerful. And it's that relationship, right? I think we're always seeking the relationship in our life, the connection. And so when we can connect the history to us, now, that's when somebody says, wow, I need to pay attention.
Yes.
I need to hear this. And then question, like the model that you shared. We can always question, and we always should. But at least you have the agency to do it, right? Oh my gosh, it's incredible. So, as we're starting to bring the episode to a close, what would you share with listeners? And you've given so many great examples, but for you, when you're thinking of people who might say, I get it, history is important, I value it, but we got to be thinking about the future. We've got to, it's what's coming next, right? What would you say to them to just maybe give them a different perspective?
Well, what I would say is, let's look at creativity and what we can do. One of the things I started doing over the last year is playing around with artificial intelligence. And I started to build in situations where I have instructions that I built an entire bot, and this bot is based off of the work that we do. I've made it where it only cites certain sources, the U.S. Archives, the UC system, as far as their archives, because it's one of the best in the world, the Library of Congress, and our original artifacts when we take the picture and upload it. And I now can do something really interesting. So I'm curious, the things that you saw today, and we brought up many things, and there's many other pieces in here. Just find a couple of things that really inspired you or just made you look at and I want to show you what it is that we can do when we talk about the future. It can be the books. It can be a yearbook. It can be anything, but anything that kind of picked you up and inspired you. And I'm going to show you what we can do now with technology.
Okay, we'll start, I would say, I don't know about inspired in a typical sense, but moved me, I would say would be these shackles.
So we can take those particular shackles and we can now build in an entirely different conversation. So let's say, for example, the shackles.
Do I need to move it?
Right. Nope. We'll do that.
You got that.
And then pick something else. Let's maybe take Frederick Douglass.
Oh yeah. Certainly, the Frederick Douglass book.
Okay. Or it can be, you pick what it is.
No, definitely.
Open up to the inside cover.
Okay, hold on. Get my gloves.
There you go.
Gotta respect. Hold on. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you're good.
Watch this. There we go. We're flexible here. We're gonna make this happen. And get it to that first page. There we go. There we go.
We'll take a picture of that. And then I'll just add one more. I'll add the Wilberforce University page.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
These are pictures from 1910
Being at
students.
that school was so powerful.
And let's go ahead and add in Hampton just because we need another HBCU.
Love it.
And then what we can do is we can take this and we can say to our bot, let's upload those. And as they upload, we'll say something like, now forgive me because I've taught it to listen to the way I think. Can you help me build a line that tells a story about these particular artifacts? Where one are slave shackles from the 1840s and 50s. Another is a book from Frederick Douglass, original printing, primary source artifact. Another is from the Hampton University album. And then another is from the Wilberforce University class. Can you kind of tell a story, but I want you to base it on the California Social Studies standards, looking at the CDE. I want you to also look at Riverside County and tie this story together that inspires using historical empathy. And then we can take this and it can start to build in a conversation.
It's incredible.
And it takes all those stories.
I love that.
And now I can use artificial intelligence to help me build timelines that work through stories that brings us closer together because I've given it all the parameters of what it needs to do.
This is so good. As a communicator, the storyline that it already came up with is From Chains to Choice, a journey of freedom, knowledge, and legacy. Wow. That's amazing. Look at this. And I love the way that it has the California standards in there. This is really, really neat. What a great resource for educators.
That's something that they can do. I think sometimes we use it and just say, write us an email. but it also can become, for me, my archivist partner, where it's helping me to find, why does this book connect to this book? What's going on with this picture, and why does it do that? One of the things that I learned as I was going through this research, and I just figured this out yesterday, I was so in love with Thomas Clarkson. I have with me a copy of Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America.
Oh, wow.
And this is an original copy from 1841.
That's incredible.
And I was trying to understand like the impact of Tocqueville on America. And I was I was reading it. And as I was reading it, I find out that there was more to the story from Tocqueville and Clarkson that I didn't know until I started working with AI to develop it. And that there was a woman who was a Quaker back in the 1750s who comes from Ireland, who goes to Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Virginia. And Mary, she goes through and she starts to interview people. And her husband, after she passes away in 1795, writes her story. 70 years before Tocqueville, a woman does the same exact thing, but her voice had gone unheard. I found her book at a rare bookstore one day and I purchased it just because of the cover. I had no clue what was in it. And because of AI, I've now been able to connect her to the work that Thomas Clarkson did, to the work that we did as an abolitionist society here in the United States, to the voice of the Quakers, to Tocqueville, to today, and learning that it's easy to miss people, especially women and voices who were not heard at the time. But if we continue to look and we can continue to dig and then we use technology with those primary sources, we can find that connection. And that's what I was able to do yesterday and just even preparing for this. And so now when I look at her story, I can tell an entirely different story that I didn't even know about 24 hours ago.
I love that.
Yeah.
What a great way to kind of bridge that gap between the past and the future and making it all so relevant to us. Ah, I love that. So before we close, and I did not give you a heads up about this because if anyone can handle it, you can, Hardy. So we do something on the Torch called the Fire Round. They are 3 questions. Okay. You know, you answer them quickly, 1 word, 1 sentence, that kind of thing. We've never kicked anyone out, so it's whatever feels good to you, right? The first 2 we ask every guest, but the third one is unique to your story. So who was one of your most impactful teachers or educators?
When I think back to Mary Stinson, she was a counselor at San Bernardino High School. And I'm still friends with her son. She was one of those counselors that would grab you by the collar, and she made sure that I still finished up school and did what I need to do. I also ran into my principal the other day, Miss Karen Craig, at a restaurant. No way. And she's now retired. And she would call my mom and be like, we're going to make sure he's going to do what he needs to do. And she said, you turned out all right. Dr. Herb Fisher, who is a stalwart here in our community, he and his family, they were always friends with our family. And these folks all came together to really beat me up and keep me on that path, even before I got to getting into college. And then from there, I had internships with like Dameron Communications and with Caltrans and working with these folks. All of these people poured into me. Each one of them poured into me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
We all need that in our lives. You've actually referenced a lot of books today, let alone I can only imagine how many you have at home and in your work and your collection. What is one of your favorite books?
So what I'm looking at right now is one that people would say, what do you mean? One I'm looking at, and mind you, I'm still back in the 1700s, 1600s reading books, is The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin. Let me explain why. Written by Harry Beecher Stowe in 1853, The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin. When she writes Uncle Tom's Cabin, it becomes one of the best sellers anywhere. At that time, think of it this way. Thomas Clarkson, he publishes his book because of the printing press at the time. He prints 100 copies. We have one of the 100 copies in our collection. But just 50, 60 years later, she prints over 300,000 copies in the United States, and it's the most translated book of all time outside of the Holy Bible in the 1850s. And so what people start saying is, there's no way a woman could write this. You had to make up all those stories. There's no way that you could write something that when she meets Abraham Lincoln, he says to her, so you're the little lady who started the Civil War. she comes out in 1853 with the key to Uncle Tom's Cabin. That was all her documented evidence, all the primary sources to where she picked up every person, every story, and she put that out. And you could not refute what she said because each one tied back to a primary source, to a newspaper article, to each one of these pieces, it tied back to something. And that is the book that I continue to go back and reference because it ties in each one of these stories that I told you today.
I love that. Really speaks to the importance of the work you're doing now. It was critical even nearly 200 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So the last one, and this is for you.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's going to be a difficult one to answer, but which piece of primary source, evidence is most meaningful to you?
That's actually easy.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
See, this is why I knew I couldn't get you. I knew it.
That's actually really easy. Each one does something different for me. So, for example, and I know I keep on saying for example, but
you've got the example, so it's okay. You can do it.
But this piece right here, this is the last flag to fly over America before the Civil War.
Oh, my goodness.
This is an original piece that was donated to us. And I love this particular piece here. But what inspires me and brings me back to what is my favorite piece? It goes back to Thomas Clarkson's dissertation. There's only 100 copies of this. And he is a young man who goes to school, who gets inspired by an assignment. And when he gets inspired by this assignment and his professor, he starts doing research. He wins first prize and he takes that to life and he does it for the rest of his life, fighting on behalf of people that don't even look like him. And he partners with all of these stories to continue to tell stories, and he's using primary sources each step of the way. I love pieces like that. One, because it is super rare. There's only 100 copies of it, but it's a story that people don't know. And when they start to learn it, it shows the power of education. But the fact that somebody could preserve it, it shows how cool it was, how they made paper that was different, how they used a printing press that was different, just the time and the writing and the letters that was different. And each time I go back and I look at his dissertation, I just realize he had no clue about the subject before it was given to him as a question from his professor. Imagine if here in Riverside County, one of our teachers, one of our staff, asked a question of one of our students, and those scholars took that work and changed the world. That's what Thomas Clarkson did.
Oh my gosh. Well, if that doesn't inspire us all, then I don't know what would. I thank you, Hardy, so much for being here, for your passion for this work, and for really translating that passion into inspiration for others. So it's incredibly powerful. It's certainly impacted my life and so many here at the Riverside County Office of Education throughout the entire Inland Empire and well beyond. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those who are wondering, if I wasn't doing this on film, and then I'd be doing this by myself, sitting in my kitchen right now. This is what I'd be doing anyway.
Well, I'm glad we could give you a reason to show off all these amazing artifacts. And thank you for listening in. The Torch is a monthly series from the Riverside County Office of Education. So make sure to follow us on your favorite streaming platform, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We are honored to share these important discussions so we can all support our families, teachers, and everyone passionate about delivering the very best for our students.